Hi there, this is Linda and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm putting together my Project Life spread for the week of September 1st through September 7th, 2025, and I'm using the Colors Storyteller Kit from Ali Edwards. Let's go ahead and dive right in. Okay, so for this spread, I am working with the Colors Storyteller Kit from Ali Edwards. And before I get started here, I just want to kind of point out that sometimes when I do my Project Life spreads, I plan a lot in advance, especially when I'm working with a kit like this. Other times I just kind of go for it. This is one where I planned a lot in advance, so you're going to see this probably going to come together a bit quicker. So for this spread, I planned this out in the Storyteller classroom using the Colors Storyteller Kit. So if you are in that classroom, you can head over there and see my initial plan for this. But essentially, I was using these as a jumping off point to add some large titles to some photos. So I'm thinking that these will be nice on the 4x6 photos. And then this one will go on a 3x4. And then this will probably go on with one of these. And then I also have, this is my title card, and then a few journal cards here. So what I did, so this was my initial plan, essentially. And going into this week, I knew I needed to take some 4x6 or horizontal photos. If you have followed me for a while, if you follow me on Instagram, you will know that 90% of the photos, probably like 99% of the photos I take are vertical. And part of that is because I do share a lot on Instagram stories. And I don't know, that orientation just makes more sense to me. So most of my photos are taken with my phone, and the majority of them are vertical. So getting vertical photos is not hard for me to do. Getting horizontal is hard. So going into this week, I knew I needed horizontal photos, and I took one, this photo. So I have this photo. This is some geese at work. Where I live in upstate New York. So we don't have geese year round, but we see them twice a year, in the fall when they are flying south for the winter, and in the spring when they are flying north to go, I'm assuming, back to Canada, because they are Canadian geese. And whenever I see them in the spring, I love it because I'm like, yes, warm weather is coming. And in the fall, it's like the doom, the dread of winter. So that is going to be that one. Then I needed some more. And so I did rotate out my mugs to fall mugs. And this was actually a square photo that I took for Instagram. And I was able to crop it. And I think that this is going to work to put like this on here. Or maybe I'm going to put this one because it's smaller. Like that. I'm not sure if I want this on there too. I also have the details. I might put that with that. Okay, so then the other one I had was this, which again was a square photo for Instagram. And I was able to just kind of crop it to be a 4x6, which I think is fine. So I've got that. Then I had one more, and what I've decided is I'm going to use that for some journaling. So we're going to talk about that in a moment. Then I printed out photos. So I have these three for journaling. And so I kind of went through my stories for the week. And like I said, sometimes I do more pre-planning than others because I had a layout sketch plan and I knew I needed these certain orientations and numbers of photos. I kind of looked at this week in advance before printing my photos to kind of come up with my plan. So this is my take a note, and I have some videos here on my YouTube sharing how I use this and some flip throughs, but essentially this is my planner. And I use this as a functional planner during the week. The week is on 2 pages. And what I do is after the week is over, after I'm done with like using it for functional planning, I come back in and I add in some photos and I add in some stories just to kind of remind myself of what happened. So the big stories of the day or of the week. And I have that as a jumping off point in figuring out my stories for Project Life. So I came up with 3 bigger stories to tell on these 3 cards. The first signs of fall, which is these guys putting out decor and stuff. So maybe I'll put that on this one next to that photo. Next one was being sick and burned out and having a lot of headaches. So not a great story, but one I want to tell. And the third one was a new notebook, starting my new notebook and just kind of really being into the planner season and kind of talking about that. I also like to include a bullet list of like little micro stories from the week, and I didn't have a card picked out for that, so I decided that's what's going to go here. So I'm going to need to pick something for my stash to write that on. Then I have all of these photos, and these are just going to go in these pockets. I have this guy here, which needs to go on top of one of these photos. So I'm going to lay them out, and then I'm going to decide which one this fits on. Does it fit on this one of pumpkin? Close. Trying to decide which one. I don't want to cover up Amy. I'm thinking maybe my new mug. That's kind of fun. I'm not sure. I'm gonna have to think about that, and I might end up like trimming it down so that it will actually fit on here with pumpkin, because I think that one's probably gonna be the cutest to have it on, and I might move around where it is on the spread also. So I think this is a good jumping off point to start. What I need to do is crop things down, get them adhered together, pick a base card for here for my stash, and I'm probably going to go through my 4x6 cards, but I might also just bring over some patterned paper or like some white paper and then do my journaling. So I'm going to go ahead and put you guys on voiceover and get this one put together. Okay, so the first step was to select a card for the background for this spot. So what I did was I went over to my Project Life card organization stash, and I do have a separate video sharing how that came together. And I pulled out the whole category that is titled No or Common Prompts that are in my 4x6 cards. So you can see from looking at these that they are cards with space for journaling that either don't have a prompt or have a prompt that could fit pretty much any story. And the very first card in the stack was this blue one that I believe is an older card from Studio Calico. And it jumped out to me immediately as one that I loved for the spread. But I wanted to go through this stack anyway, just in case there was something I liked better, or just because I haven't gone through these cards recently and I wanted to see what I had. I also thought it would be interesting for you guys to see kind of my process of looking through these. However, that first card worked, and if I was in a rush and I wanted, not necessarily a rush, but if I wanted to get this done in a quicker fashion, I would have just used that card because it was good enough, it worked, it looks nice, and honestly, I ended up committing to it in the end. I sometimes have this like thought in my head when I'm working with my stash that I have to look at every single possible option, and you can see me doing that here, trying out different cards as possibilities. That one obviously would work also, but there is no such thing as the perfect card. It doesn't really matter. If you find one that works, just go with it. You don't need to spend the time going through everything in your stash. Now, I know I made that conscious choice to do it here, and sometimes it is fun to do that. But if you struggle with decision paralysis or these spreads take too long, that is one of my big tips for working with your stash, is just take the first one that fits and go with it. Okay, so anyways, I'm still going through this stack. You can see I'm going pretty quickly though. There are a lot of cards in here. There's a lot of repeated cards. And part of why I wanted to look through it right now too is just to kind of get an idea of what's in there, because as I see those repeated cards over and over again in that stack, it gives me ideas for maybe some future spreads that I might want to do for my stash. So I put that away, and now I'm going to work on actually putting my spread together. This was a 3x4 card from the kit. This was actually part of one of the 12x12 papers that I cut up. If you're curious how I planned this, I do have that in the Storyteller classroom. I have a whole lesson in there sharing my plans for using this kit, so you can go check that out if you're interested. But I did cut those cards out in advance, and I also wanted to use up all of these word strips in this spread. So I thought these would be really fun as bold elements on photos. And so what I'm doing now is just kind of going around, and I'm going to adhere them down onto the photos and get everything kind of situated across the spread. This one, like I said in the intro, was a little too wide. It was covering up part of pumpkin, so I trimmed it down a bit, and now I think it works a little bit better in terms of fitting on this 3x4 photo. I know I had planned this spread in advance, and while I was living my life during this week, I could have taken some time to make sure I took photos that fit with the products, and I have done that in the past. Sometimes that is fun. If you feel like your life is not that interesting, if you have a week that seems like it's going to be pretty boring, coming up with your theme ahead of time and then going throughout the week looking for that theme and specifically looking for photos to take that fit your spread is actually really fun. It is a fun kind of scavenger hunt to go on during just an ordinary boring week and to make it a little more exciting. So now I'm going to work on my journaling cards here, and I wanted to stamp a title on these. So what I did was I pulled over my stamp organization binder to pick out one of my alpha stamps. And I do have a video sharing my stamp organization system. I will link that in the description box below if you're interested. I also plan to do an updated video probably coming next month, so stay tuned for that one. I ended up selecting this alpha stamp set that is an older one from Kelly Perky because it is kind of a tall, narrow font. I know that the font on all of those die cut pieces was this big, wide one, and I was consciously trying to pick a font that wasn't the same because I don't have that same font, but one that I thought would go well with it. So this one is tall and narrow because I also thought that this would fit really well in this section right here on this like tag shaped one, the blue one right there, and it does. So what I'm doing is I wrote out on my sticky note what I wanted to stamp, and then I'm using that as reference to stamp multiple words at a time because it's a little bit quicker to do it that way. And having that written down on the sticky note prevents me from making mistakes as I go back and forth between different words. So the 3 stories that I decided to tell on these cards are theme-based stories. And this is something I do a lot in my project life. As I go through putting together a spread, I try to look at themes from the week that came up, maybe on 1 or 2 days, maybe all the way across the week, maybe it was just a one-day thing, but different themes that I could bunch together in a story. And that's what I did for these 3 cards. The first one is a new notebook. So I got a new notebook as part of my 2026 lineup. I was super excited about it, and I decided that I was going to go ahead and dive into that during this week. So I set it up and I used it. So that's the story on this green card. The blue one says Ugh Burnout. So I was sick this week and also struggling with burnout. So on that card, I'm going to journal about that story. So it's a little bit about, I ended up leaving work early sick one day. I had a headache for a couple of days. I suffer from chronic migraines and they seem to be getting worse right now. I think it's the change in the seasons, but also just kind of journaling about that in general. And then the Hello Fall one is just all the signs of fall as we're heading into September. This is the first week of September, so we put out our fall decor. The geese were flying south, so I wanted to document that as a theme from this week. For my journaling, I'm using a TWSBI Eco Extra Fine Tip. This is a fountain pen. This is a very good fountain pen if you are interested in getting into fountain pens. If you don't have one, this is a great starter pen because it is a good price point for a fountain pen. And it is also a good quality fountain pen. There are some cheaper fountain pens out there. I have tried some of them and some of them are decent, but this one is a good balance of quality and price. And it is also super easy to clean and fill. Some fountain pens, even some expensive ones, are not easy to clean and fill. And this one is by far the easiest because it doesn't use cartridges. It's all inside just the one pen. So if you are interested in a fountain pen, I highly recommend this one. I'm also using Diatramentus Archival ink, which is a black ink that acts more like a gel pen ink than a fountain pen ink. You still get the fun feel of writing with a fountain pen and the flowiness of fountain pen ink, but it dries pretty well without smearing, which is not something that a lot of fountain pen ink does. So this one is great for scrapbooking. I use it pretty frequently. And as you can see in the spread, I am journaling on some of my photos, which I really, really love. I did it in a previous spread a couple of weeks prior. I can't remember which one, but there's a process video for that one also. And I just love this pen and ink combination writing on top of my photos. The photos I have are printed on Canon Luster photo paper. So it is a glossier photo paper, but it's not super shiny glossy. It is very slick and smooth, but it doesn't show fingerprints. So I absolutely love it for my scrapbooking. and it works really well to write on top of it with this pen. Moving on to my bullet point list. So in pretty much every week in project life, I like to have a bullet point list, and these are the little like micro stories from the week. So the stories that I want to make note of, but they are not necessarily big enough to warrant their own card. They might not have a photo to go along with them, just little details of the week. And I felt like this would be a fun place to include those. I pulled over some enamel dots from a Cocoa Daisy kit, and I'm using those as my bullet points. I frequently use my Zig dot marker for bullet points, but I wanted to use these because I wanted to bring in a little bit of the color. And I also have so many of these enamel dots, and they make just such fun bullet points. I need to start using them a bit more. So I'm going to try to do that going forward. This spread is coming together pretty quick and easily because I'm not really going to bring in any additional embellishments. How I embellished my photos in this spread was really the journaling right on top of them. And that was kind of my main kind of design element, in addition to the products from the kit, which I really thought really shine because there are these big, bold titles and they really pop when you look at this spread. So I felt like adding some additional embellishments would just kind of compete with that. And it was going to be too much. So I like that the spread is really focused on the big, bold black text. I added my bold black text stamping to kind of pair with that and not compete. And I think that it ends up working pretty well. So now I'm just journaling about the burnout story. Off camera, I have my take a note. And in my take a note, I jot down my stories from the week. I think I went over that earlier in this video. But that is where I have all of those stories written down, or at least like little bullet point notes about the stories, so that is prompting my memory as I'm journaling this. I am not remembering all of these things. I had a little spot right there, so I decided to bring over a sticker from the Coffee Monster Co. of like a foggy little emoji, and I thought that fit perfectly right there. Now I'm just going to wrap up the spread and slip everything into the pockets. I have to trim some of these down a bit to fit into the pockets because some of these were cropped from 12 by 12 paper, and I feel like these page protectors are maybe a little bit tighter, but whatever, it doesn't really matter. So the page protectors that I'm using here are actually from Ali Edwards. I use 9 by 12 albums from scrapbook.com, and they have 3 rings. And the ones from Ali Edwards have 4 rings. So I had to repunch the holes on these, but I'm trying to kind of use them up as I have transitioned to using the scrapbook.com albums. I like to use theirs because they are consistently available, and they also have more variations of page protectors, and those are also consistently available. They did have a problem where everything was out of stock for a little while, but they do always plan to restock them, and they have. And in fact, those page protectors and albums were on sale the last time I checked. So I'm going to link those in the description box below if you are interested in picking up more, or if you're looking into starting this project in 2026, or even if you want to start it now. It's never the wrong time to start a project. You can always just go ahead and do that, right? But I'm going to link those in the description box below. And I do have an affiliate link, and I want to disclose that, but I purchase all of my own products from there, so I don't get a discount, and that affiliate link won't cost you anything. It just helps support my channel and keep my content free, because I do really want to offer free quality content here on YouTube. But I also need some sort of compensation to help, compensate me for my time and the products and everything I need to purchase. So I'm just finishing up this spread, going ahead and slipping everything into the pockets. Like I said, I have to trim a lot of these down to get them to fit, but that's totally fine. It doesn't really bother me. I added a label onto that one photo of that mug because I did have a little bit of story I wanted to add on there that wasn't included in anywhere else. And there wasn't a good spot on that photo to include with the black pen because it was so dark. So that's the only one that I added something additional on.
as I was wrapping this up, that details card right there was bothering me because it has rounded corners, and I really don't like rounded corners. So I just got some white scratch paper, and you can see it wasn't even perfectly clean scratch paper, and cropped it to 4x6, and I'm adhering that on there so that it is going to have white squared corners behind that card. There you go. Here is a look at that completed spread and how it came together. I'm really happy with this one. Thank you guys so much for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down below. And as always, I hope to see you guys on the next one. Bye.